Somewhere deep in the cargo ring of Station Verada, a wall gave way. It did not make a dramatic sound at first. There was a low groan, like a ship settling, and then a sharp crack, and then everything came down at once. Cargo crates, support beams, pressure piping, all of it folded inward like a closed fist. The emergency lights blinked on. The alarms followed. And within 2 minutes, the evacuation order covered the entire east cargo wing. Most people moved away from it. Nara moved toward it. She was not supposed to. She was a nurse at the Interspecies Medical Center, returning from a routine supply run with a cart full of fluid packs and replacement tubing. She had heard the crack from 3 corridors away. She had felt it in her feet. And when the alarm sounded and the crowd started moving in the other direction, she stood still for a moment, listened, and then left her cart by the wall and walked the wrong way. She did not think of herself as brave. She thought the alarm was probably a pressure blowout, maybe a gas line, something she could assess and report before the emergency crews arrived. She had done field triage before. She knew what collapsed spaces looked like. What she did not expect was sound coming from inside. She heard it when she got close to the debris wall. A faint, thin sound, barely above silence. Not a voice. Not any sound she could name clearly. But it was there, repeating, small and insistent, buried under 2 tons of collapsed structure. She found a gap in the wreckage and used her torch to look through it. 2 amber eyes looked back at her. The hatchling was wedged into a pocket between a fallen support beam and the hull wall. She was very small, golden bronze scales, still soft looking at the edges, the kind of young that made everything about her seem temporary and unfinished. One wing was pinned under a beam. The other was folded tight against her side. She was not making the sound anymore. She had stopped when the light hit her. She was watching Nara very carefully instead. Nara looked at the beam. She looked at the gap. She looked around for tools. There was a cargo jack 3 meters away, meant for moving equipment crates. It was heavy and awkward, and she had never used one in a collapse before. She dragged it over anyway. She positioned it under the beam by feel and by guessing. She pumped it up slowly, watching the beam shift by centimeters. The hatchling did not move. She tracked Nara's hands. She watched everything. When the beam was high enough, Nara reached in and got both arms around the hatchling and pulled her out carefully, slowly, checking the wing as she moved it. The wing was hurt. She could see the way it hung, but it was not destroyed. The hatchling weighed more than she expected. She adjusted her grip and stood. She took off her jacket with one hand, which was harder than it sounds, and wrapped it around the hatchling to keep her from the cold of the corridor. The hatchling let her do this. She did not fight or pull away. She pressed her nose briefly against the side of Nara's neck and then went still. Nara walked. She went through the first security checkpoint and told them she needed medical access. They told her to wait for species assessment. She said the patient was injured and walked past them. They called after her. She kept walking. Second checkpoint. Same conversation. Same result. Third checkpoint was 2 guards who looked at the small golden shape wrapped in her jacket and stepped aside without being asked. By the time she reached the IMC and set the hatchling down on an emergency table, her arms were shaking from the weight. She did not say anything dramatic. She told the attending medic what she had found, where and what condition the wing was in, using correct clinical terms. She described the beam, the space, the method she had used to free her. She was still talking when the hatchling reached out one small clawed foot and wrapped it around Nara's little finger. She did not let go. Nara looked down at her. The amber eyes were still watching, still careful, still completely focused on her face, the same way they had been from the moment the torchlight first found them in the dark. Nara stopped talking. She stood there beside the table, one finger held, while the medics worked around her. She told herself she would stay only until the hatchling calmed down, until she felt safe, just until then. Outside, the emergency crews were reaching the cargo wing. The alerts were still running. Someone was looking for the nurse who had walked the wrong way through 3 checkpoints carrying something she probably should not have been carrying alone. Inside the IMC, the hatchling's grip did not loosen. Nara did not move. The hatchling's name, officially, was Patient 7 Delta Aerith, which was the IMC's way of saying they did not know what to call her yet. Bryn called her Scylla, because he said every patient deserved a name and 7 Delta Aerith was not one. Nobody argued with him. By the second morning it had spread through the entire ward, and even Dr. Orvin was using it, though he wrote it in the file with one eyebrow raised. The wing was set and bandaged. The internal scans came back clean. No organ damage, no serious bleeding. Remarkable luck for a collapse that size. Scylla was small, but she was not fragile, and her body was doing exactly what young dragon bodies were supposed to do, which was heal aggressively and without much assistance. Medically, she was fine. Everything else was a problem. She would not eat unless Nara was in the room. This was discovered on the first morning when the feeding team brought in a nutrient mix appropriate for hatchlings of her species, and she simply looked at it. She did not sniff it or push it away. She looked at it the way someone looks at a thing that does not interest them at all, and then she looked at the door. They tried again an hour later. Same result. They called Nara. Nara came in, still in her civilian clothes because her shift did not start for 2 hours, and sat down next to the bed. Scylla looked at her for a moment. Then she ate everything in the bowl and made a low sound that Bryn described in his unofficial notes as smug. Bryn had started keeping unofficial notes on the third day because he said the situation was medically unique and someone should be documenting it. His notes were detailed and extremely unprofessional in tone. He wrote things like, patient tracked nurse Nara's footsteps through wall again, adjusted her position on bed, looked very pleased about it, and feeding team tried again without Nara. Patient stared at them until they were uncomfortable. They left. He showed the notes to Nara at the end of the third shift. She read them without saying anything for a long time. Then she said she did not think it was as significant as he was making it sound. Bryn pointed at the entry that read, patient pressed ear flat against wall, located exact position of nurse Nara in corridor, oriented herself accordingly, waited. He asked if she still thought it was not significant. Nara did not answer. On day 4, Dr. Orvin called her into his office. He had 4 arms and he used all of them when he was being careful with his words, which he was now. He said the situation was medically unprecedented. He said a bond between a hatchling and a non-dragon formed this early in life was outside his clinical experience. He said the Galactic Medical Registry had 3 documented cases of cross-species hatchling bonding and none of them had been managed well. He was concerned. He asked Nara to limit her contact, reduce visits, allow the hatchling to adjust to other caregivers. Gently, professionally, he said this was the correct course. Nara agreed. She said it was a reasonable medical position. She would follow his guidance. She reduced her visits. Scylla stopped eating. Not slowly, not reluctantly. She just stopped. She sat in the center of her recovery bed and she did not eat, and she did not sleep well, and she made no sound. And when Bryn checked on her, she looked at the door with an expression that he wrote down as waiting, very deliberately, on purpose. By hour 18, Orvin reviewed the hydration levels and told Nara to go back in. Nara went back in. Scylla ate 3 full bowls and curled up and slept within 10 minutes. Her bandaged wings stretched slightly open, her golden scales catching the soft ward lighting. Bryn leaned against the doorway and watched. Then he found Nara in the corridor and said nothing for a moment, which was unusual for him. Then he said, in 17 years of nursing, across 9 species, I have never once seen a patient choose their healer. Most of them tolerate us. They comply. They let us do our work. They do not choose. He paused. She is choosing you. Every single time there is a choice, she picks you. That is not a medical complication. That is a statement. Nara said she heard him. Bryn said he was not finished. He said, she tracked you through a wall. She went on hunger strike. She is 3 weeks old, and she is negotiating. He looked through the small window into Scylla's room, where the hatchling was deeply asleep, curled tight, the picture of contentment. Whatever she decided about you in that cargo bay, she decided it completely. Nara looked through the window too. Scylla's breathing was slow and even. Her small side rose and fell. The damaged wing, even in sleep, was turned slightly toward the door, toward Nara's side of the room. Nara thought about saying something practical, something clinical, something that sounded like she had this under control. Instead, she said, quietly, she was alone under all of that in the dark. Bryn nodded. Yes, he said. And then she was not. He let that sit there. He did not add anything to it. He picked up his notes and walked back to the nursing station, and Nara stood in the corridor for a while longer, and somewhere behind the door, Silas slept the deep and trusting sleep of someone who was no longer worried about what came next. 7 days after the collapse, the docking bay logged an arrival that made the shift controller sit up very straight in his chair. The ship was large, old, and moved the way powerful things move, without hurrying, without apology. It docked in Bay 9 with a precision that required no assistance. When the outer doors opened, 3 figures walked out. The 2 attendants were large. The one in the center was larger, and silver from the base of her horns to the tip of her tail, and she moved through the corridor with the kind of quiet that makes noise step aside. Her name was Consul RHE. The message had come through official channels the day before. Dragon Clan Aerith had received word of the transport accident. 1 hatchling survived. They were sending a representative to collect her and return her to the breeding colonies for proper clan care. The language was formal and polite and left no room for discussion. Ward Doss, station administrator, had spent the entire night before her arrival preparing. He had reviewed interspecies diplomatic protocols. He had set up a formal meeting room. He had changed his uniform twice. He was standing at the docking bay entrance when Consul RHE arrived, and he greeted her with a correct 3-point bow, which he had practiced. She looked at him briefly, inclined her head, asked, in standard, to be taken to the hatchling. No small talk, no refreshments, no interest in the formal meeting room. Doss took her to the IMC. The station went quiet around them as they walked. Species who normally argued over corridor space moved to the walls without being asked. A group of Sethian traders who were known for being loud went silent the moment RHE's shadow reached them. Even the overhead ventilation system seemed to hush. Bren was at the nursing station when they came through the ward entrance. He later said that he had worked with 4 armed insectoid surgeons and seen patients who communicated entirely in ultrasound and treated a Kelthran warrior who had tried to eat a plasma conduit. He thought he was not easily impressed. He was, he admitted, somewhat impressed by Consul RHE. She stood at the nursing station and asked which room held the hatchling. She was told. She walked to the door, opened it, and stepped inside. Scylla was awake. She had been awake for an hour, sitting near the edge of her recovery bed with her ears up and her eyes toward the window, the way she sometimes sat when she was paying attention to something far away. When RHE entered, Scylla looked at her. And then Scylla moved to the far wall. Not in fear exactly. She did not hide or cower. She pressed herself against the wall, and she looked at the door that Nara used. She sat down with her back to the wall, and she waited. Her eyes moved to RHE once, briefly, and then went back to the door. Consul RHE stood very still. She was old enough that she had seen nearly everything that a long life in the galaxy could produce. She had negotiated with 6 different space-faring civilizations. She had attended the hatchings of 43 members of Clan Aerith. She had seen hatchlings be shy, be difficult, be uncertain around strangers. She had never seen a hatchling refuse to acknowledge an elder and then look at a door as though the elder were simply furniture. She turned to Dr. Orvin, who had come in quietly behind her. She asked, in a tone that was controlled and careful, what had happened. Orvin told her. All of it. The collapse. The rescue. The bonding behavior. The hunger. The tracking through walls. He was precise and clinical, and he did not editorialize, but the facts, stacked together, made their own argument. RHE listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked to meet the human who had found the hatchling. Doss, who had been standing in the corridor trying to be helpful, sent for Nara immediately. He looked, Bren noted, extremely nervous. Bren found this reasonable. Nara arrived in her work clothes. She had been in the middle of charting. She came through the ward door and stopped when she saw RHE, and RHE looked at her, and there was a moment where the two of them were simply taking stock of each other. RHE was ancient and enormous and silver and had the kind of face that had watched centuries pass. Nara was an ordinary human woman in medical scrubs with her hair pulled back. "You are the one," RHE said. "Not a question. I found her in the cargo bay," Nara said. "I brought her here." RHE's eyes moved to Scylla. Scylla, who had not moved from the far wall, was now watching Nara with the focused, settled attention she always had when Nara was in the room. Her ears were up. Her posture had changed. She was still pressed against the wall, but she was no longer braced. RHE watched this. Her expression was difficult to read. She was quiet for long enough that Das shifted his weight twice. Then she said, slowly, "Tell me exactly what you did." From the beginning. Nara told her. Plainly. She described the sound she had heard from 3 corridors away. The decision to walk toward it instead of away. The gap in the debris, the torch, the 2 amber eyes. The cargo jack. The jacket. The 3 checkpoints. She told it without drama. Just the order it had happened in. When she finished, Rhe did not respond immediately. She looked at Scylla. Scylla looked back at Nara. And Rhe said, very quietly, "She was alone in the dark under the weight of everything. And you came without anyone asking you to." Nara said she had just heard a sound. Rhe said, she did not. She looked at Scylla again, who was now leaning very slightly toward the center of the room, toward Nara. "She remembers exactly what you did. Hatchlings always do." Consul Rhe asked for a private room. Das offered the formal meeting space he had prepared the night before, with the good chairs and the refreshment table. Rhe looked at it once and chose a small and used consultation room across the hall instead. 3 chairs, a table, a window that showed the stars on one side and the station's inner ring on the other. She sat across from Nara. She folded her hands, which were large and silver and crossed with old scars, and she looked at the human nurse the way someone looks at a thing they are trying to understand completely before they speak about it. Then she explained. "Dragon hatchlings," she said, "are not like hatchlings of most species. They do not come into the world confused. They come into it very awake, very aware, and absolutely certain about almost nothing except one thing: danger and safety. In the first few weeks of life, they are reading everything around them constantly. Every sound, every temperature, every heartbeat nearby. They are deciding, over and over, what the world is." This period had a name in Old Dragon. Rhe translated it simply as the first knowing. During the first knowing, a hatchling's instincts are not habits yet, they are decisions. Real ones. And whatever a hatchling decides during that time, they decide completely. Not because they are told to. Not because of clan rules or proximity or familiarity. Because something in the world showed them something true, and they recognized it. Most hatchlings, she said, do the first knowing surrounded by clan. By their own kind. By familiar smells and familiar sounds. It is designed to be easy. Scylla had done her first knowing alone, in a collapsed cargo bay, in the dark, in pain. And then something had come through the dark toward her. Nara listened to all of this without speaking. She was very still in the way that people get still when they understand that something important is being said and they do not want to interrupt it. Rhe said, when a hatchling bonds during the first knowing, it is not like a pet choosing a favorite person. It is not comfort or habit. The hatchling is not bonding to a caretaker. She is bonding to an act, to the specific shape of a thing that happened to her in the most vulnerable moment of her life. She is saying, this is what safe means. This is what the world can be. The person attached to that act becomes what dragon culture calls a hearthkeeper. Nara said, what is a hearthkeeper? Rhe said it was not a guardian, not an owner, not a parent in any human sense of the word. A hearthkeeper was the person a dragon had chosen to anchor to, the fixed point, the thing that, no matter what happened later in life, the dragon always knew was there. It was, Rhe said carefully, a lifelong tie. Nara was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been sitting in her since Rhe first walked into the ward. She asked what it meant for Scylla, whether she could still go back to the clan, whether forcing a separation now would hurt her. Rhe answered honestly. Scylla could return to Clan Aerith. She could be raised in clan traditions. She could learn dragon language, dragon history, dragon culture, all of it. None of that was lost. But if she was separated from her hearthkeeper during the first knowing phase, which was not yet complete, the grief of it would be significant. Hatchlings who lost their hearthkeeper in this phase sometimes recovered. Sometimes they did not. They could go quiet inside themselves in a way that was very hard to reach later. Nara sat with this. Outside the small window, the stars were steady and indifferent. The inner ring of the station turned slowly, lights moving across the curved hull. She asked, how does the clan see this? Are you angry? Rhe said no. She said anger would require blame, and there was no one to blame for what had happened in that cargo bay. She said the clan was grieving the hatchlings that had not survived. She said they had come to collect Scylla because that was what you did. You came for your own. But, she said, What she had found here was not what she expected to find. She had expected a hatchling in medical distress, confused and displaced, waiting to be taken home. Instead, she had found a hatchling who pressed herself against a wall rather than approach an elder, who tracked a human nurse through walls, who had, in RHE's long experience, already made up her mind entirely. The bond was real. RHE had seen enough to know that. Denying it would not undo it. It would only make Scylla carry it alone. And then RHE said the thing she had come to say, which was the real reason for this room and this conversation. I am not here to take her from you. She looked at Nara steadily. I did not know what I would find. Now I know. The decision is not mine to make. She paused. The question, human, is what you want. Nara did not answer right away. She looked at the window. She looked at her own hands. She thought about her apartment, her small life, her shift schedule, the herb garden under the UV lamp. She thought about a pair of amber eyes and a torch beam, very still, very watchful, waiting to see what the world would do next. She said she needed one night to think. RHE said that was reasonable. She said she would wait. She did not say it like a threat. She said it like someone who understood what it meant to take a thing seriously. The night shift at the IMC was quiet in the way long shifts get quiet, not empty, but settled. The overhead lights dimmed to their night level. The corridors thinned out. The sounds changed from busy to steady, machines doing their slow work, the distant hum of the station turning. Nara had cleared it with Orvin. She took the chair from the corridor and brought it into Scylla's recovery room and sat down next to the bed. Scylla was awake. She had probably been awake for a while, sensing Nara's approach down the hall the way she always did. She was sitting upright in the center of her bed with her bandaged wing folded against her side and her amber eyes catching the soft blue of the night lighting. She looked at Nara the way she always looked at Nara, fully, completely, without looking anywhere else. Nara did not say anything for a long time. She just sat. She thought about what her life actually looked like, laid out plainly without any feeling attached to it. Nurse at the IMC, 7 years. Night shifts because she preferred them, because the station was different at night, quieter and more honest. A one-room apartment in the residential ring, small, tidy, a window that looked out at the docking bays. The herb garden under the UV lamp because she had grown up with a garden and missed green things. A small number of friends, Bryn being the closest. No family within 6 transit jumps. A life that worked. That was the right way to say it. Not spectacular. Not incomplete. It worked, and she had built it carefully, and she was not unhappy in it. She thought about what RHE had said. Lifelong. She thought about what that word meant when attached to a dragon. Dragons lived a very long time. Longer than humans by several centuries. Scylla, sitting on that medical bed right now, looking at her with those steady amber eyes, would still be alive long after Nara was gone. She thought, that is a weight for a creature to carry. And then she thought, Scylla did not choose that. She did not choose any of it. She was 3 weeks old and alone under a collapsed wall, and something came through the dark toward her, and she held on to it with everything she had. You could not be angry at her for that. You could not fix it by removing yourself. You could only decide what you were going to do with it. Nara looked at Scylla. Scylla looked back at her. Nara said, quietly, out loud, into the empty room, "You are going to be enormous." Scylla made a very small sound. It was the low-held note sound she made when she was content. Nara said, "You are going to be larger than this room eventually. Probably much larger." She paused. "I have a small apartment." Scylla tilted her head. Nara said, "The herb garden is going to have to move." And that was the moment, she thought later, when she knew what she had decided. Not because of anything dramatic. Because she had said the herb garden was going to have to move, and she had not felt lost when she said it. She had felt logistics, which meant the decision was already done, and she had just been catching up. In the morning, she went to consul RHE with her conditions. She said she would be Scylla's hearthkeeper, but the clan had full access. Always. Scylla would be raised in dragon tradition, language, history, culture, ceremonies. All of it. Nara was not trying to replace the clan. She was not trying to make Scylla human. She was an anchor point and nothing more than that, and she expected the clan to hold everything else. She said all of this looking directly at RHE, without rushing. RHE listened to every word. When Nara finished, there was silence in the small room. Then RHE said something in Old Dragon first. The sound of it was low and resonant and very old. Then she translated, "You are already thinking like one of us." She said it was not a compliment exactly. It was an observation. Dragon elders who accepted responsibility talked about it the way Nara had just talked. Not about what they were gaining, but about what the young one needed and who would provide it and how. Putting the hatchling at the center of the decision rather than themselves. Archie had been doing this work for a very long time, and she knew the difference between someone performing nobility and someone who had simply worked out what was right. She accepted the conditions without negotiating a single one of them. Ward Doss, who had been standing in the corridor outside because Bryn had told him it might be important and he should probably be there, went back to his office and opened a blank document and began writing. He called it the Hearthkeeper Accord. He worked on it for 6 hours without stopping. He found it surprisingly easy to write because the logic of it was clear once you understood what had actually happened. Bryn found Nara in the break room afterward. She was sitting at the table looking at her tea. He sat across from her. "Dragon Mom," he said. Nara put her face in her hands. "I told you not to call me that." "You are correct. I will not call you that," Bryn said. "I will instead call you the first human hearthkeeper in recorded galactic history." He paused. "Which is longer, but more accurate." Nara looked up. "She is going to be 3 times the size of this room." "At least," Bryn agreed cheerfully. "Where is she going to sleep?" "You will figure it out." He picked up his notes. "You figured out a cargo jack in a collapsed bay. You will figure out sleeping arrangements." He left her with that. Nara picked up her tea. It had gone cold. She held it anyway, sitting in the break room of the IMC in the middle of the night, thinking about moving the herb garden, and found, somewhat to her surprise, that she felt completely calm. Discharge day on Station Verada was usually straightforward. A signature, a care summary, a polite word from the attending physician. Patients left, and the bed was cleaned, and life continued. Nobody told the IMC staff that discharge day for Scylla was going to be different. They figured it out on their own. By the time the 7th hour of morning shift arrived, there were 12 people in the corridor outside Scylla's recovery room who all had very convincing reasons for being there. The supply tech was restocking a cart that had been fully stocked yesterday. 2 orderlies were checking a wall panel that was working perfectly. Bryn was standing at the nursing station with a small tray of food he had prepared for the journey, which made no sense because Scylla was moving to the residential ring, not departing the station. Dr. Orvin had signed the discharge paperwork that morning and added a note to the file. The note read, "Patient recovery, complete. Wing healing, excellent. Emotional and social situation, unprecedented. Recommend addition to galactic medical literature at earliest opportunity." He had also, quietly, rearranged his schedule so that he was doing rounds in the East Ward at exactly this hour for no particular reason. Consul RHE arrived at the IMC entrance at 7:15 with her 2 attendants. She was as she always was, silver, immense, completely still in herself. But she stopped at the ward entrance and she waited rather than walking in, which was not how she had entered the first time. Something had shifted in how she was approaching this space. Nara came through the main doors 2 minutes later, off her night shift, still in her work clothes. She had not gone home. She had spent the last hour of her shift doing paperwork that could have waited, staying close, not examining why. She walked to Scylla's room. The door was open. It had been open for an hour, because Scylla had pushed it with her nose sometime around 6 in the morning, and the staff had let it stay that way. She did not like closed doors when she was awake. Scylla was standing at the center of the room. Not sitting, not resting, standing, upright, wings folded correctly, her gold and bronze scales catching the morning light from the corridor window. Her bandaged wing was held neatly, not perfectly, still careful with it, but held. Her amber eyes were on the door. She had been waiting. Nara stepped into the room. Scylla did not run to her. She walked, measured and deliberate, placing each foot carefully, the way young dragons move when they are being intentional. She crossed the distance between them and stopped directly in front of Nara and sat back on her haunches, which brought her eyes level with Nara's collarbone. And then she pressed her forehead forward, slowly, against Nara's chest. It was a dragon greeting. RHE had explained it the evening before, briefly, without making a large thing of it. It was used between bonded dragons, between clan members, between those who knew each other at the level that mattered. It meant, "I see you. I know who you are. You are mine and I am yours, and this is not in question." Nara put both hands on either side of Sila's head, the way Rhe had shown her, firm and gentle at the same time, palms against the smooth scales just behind the jaw, and pressed her own forehead down to meet Sila's. They stayed like that for a moment. The corridor was very quiet. Bren later said he did not know why his notes got blurry at that point. He said it was probably the ventilation system. Consul Rhe, standing at the ward entrance, watched. Her two attendants watched. None of them spoke. When Nara finally straightened and Sila stepped back and looked up at her, Rhe did something that the staff had not seen her do once in the days she had been on the station. She inclined her head, slowly, all the way down and back up. A full inclination, deep and held, the kind that in dragon culture was not given casually. It was the deepest mark of respect they had. They walked out together through the corridor. Nara, Sila stepping beside her, close, not touching, just close, the exact distance she always kept from Nara. Consul Rhe and her attendants behind them. The staff along the corridor did not cheer or applaud. That was not the right thing for this. They simply watched, and some of them nodded, and the supply tech forgot entirely about the cart. Ward Doss submitted the Hearthkeeper Accord to the Galactic Assembly that afternoon. It was 14 pages and a glossary. The review committee flagged it for expedited reading on the grounds that it was the only document of its kind in existence. They also noted, in their internal comments, that it had been written by a single station administrator in under 8 hours, and that the language was unusually precise for a first draft. 3 weeks later, it was ratified, the first of its kind. In the residential ring, Nara's apartment had been rearranged. The herb garden was on the high shelf, still healthy, growing well under the UV lamp, just moved up and to the left. A large woven mat covered most of the floor beside the bed. It had been chosen for the right size, the right weight, the right texture for young dragon scales. At night, a golden wing rose and fell slowly at the mat's edge, the scales catching whatever light came through the docking bay window. Sila slept the way she had slept in the IMC. Deeply, completely, without concern. Nara sat at the small table nearby, shift schedule open, tea warm this time. The next morning she was back on nights. She had cleared it with Orvin. The break room had a new entry in the visitor log, added by the front desk without anyone asking them to. It read, Sila. Species, dragon, hatchling. Status, accompanying. Nobody questioned it. On Station Verada, after 3 weeks of watching a baby dragon sit patiently in a hospital bed and refuse every invitation to leave, waiting only for the one human who had thought to come for her in the dark, nobody questioned it at all.